Moviegoers turned out in force this weekend to witness the phenomenon of Borat firsthand. I mean, the comedy, it opened to over 26 million in a limited release. It fought off all the negative press, and it even attracted the audience that it was actually mocking. So why did Borat succeed where others have failed? High five! It's The Loop. Seriously. Here it is. Joining us tonight from Los Angeles, film critic for USA Today, Scott Bowles is back for more punishment, and managing editor of Variety, Michael Spire. Gentlemen, welcome to The Loop.
Thank you.
Of course, we have to talk Borat because who isn't these days? And Michael, I live in a bit of a bubble here, so everybody that I know was totally excited for this film. They knew what they were getting themselves into. They bought into the Borat hype. Was there anybody out there, though, aside from my little Los Angeles bubble, that underestimated Borat, that didn't think it would perform?
Yeah, a lot of people in Hollywood, and there's always a lot of naysayers who think that no movie can live up to the hype, and we're always flooded with so many movies during the summer and that kind of big movie season kind of movies that never do live up to the hype.
What led them to believe that, though? Because it seemed like, at least from my perspective, it seemed like everybody was talking about it. Everybody wanted more Borat. Why were they so scared?
Well, a lot of people don't think that any movie can be as funny as it is. I mean, you got to remember that there has been a death of sitcoms on television, and now even in the movies, there aren't that many funny movies anymore. So for a movie to be claimed to be the funniest movie ever, and all those promo ads that have run, it was hard for a lot of people to imagine that it's that funny, but indeed, the responses are great. This is a movie that's a huge hit, and it's just expanding next week, so it's going to be even bigger.
Well, Scott, I know that, I'm not one of those people out there that says you can't be funny, because I know here on Attack of the Show, we make the single most hilarious, entertaining television show every day live. But when it comes to Borat, what did you think? Was this the funniest movie ever? Did it warrant that kind of hype?
I don't think it was the funniest movie of the year. I didn't think it was as funny as Little Miss Sunshine. I did think it was one of the scariest movies of the year. I mean, you look at what people are willing to say on camera in a very public venue. To me, it was pretty frightening stuff, and that was what was so canny about Borat, was that for all the pratfalls, for all the jokes, what he was really getting at was the ignorance and the prejudice of people. It was much scarier than any of the horror films this year. I actually don't think it lived up to its hype in terms of the humor. When I talk to people, they say they enjoyed it, but what they were really stunned by was what people were willing to say on camera. I found it to be a pretty terrifying film.
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that you don't see movies like this at all, really. So we have someone new to focus on, and the news shows have someone new to write about, because we've had the Farrelly Brothers, we've had the Jim Carrey kind of movies, the Robin Williams movies, and now someone new, a new character and something unique. It's reality film, really, because that's what it is.
Well, and I loved it because it was reality film. Like, one of my favorite aspects, of course, was the social commentary, and that's why, Scott, I got to ask, is it fair to compare it to A Little Miss Sunshine when there's such completely different types of humor?
Well, it's fair in that they're both comedies, and Fox is pitching it as a funny film. Really, it's fair to compare it to a Jackass, to one of these movies that have the guerrilla-style filmmaking. It's half scripted, half spontaneous. They're selling it as a comedy, so it needs to be measured against other comedies. But you're absolutely right. I mean, this is an unusual film. This is the reason it did well, because this is not the type of film that we're used to, at least from Hollywood.
Michael, do you think they're selling it as a comedy because Fox can't come out and say, I mean, we saw how they buried Idiocracy, which was really scathing commentary and a very funny film. Are they selling it as a comedy simply because they're too scared, or they don't think audiences will get it if they say this is biting social commentary with a couple pratfalls and fart jokes?
They're letting two things do the talking. One is, when you have his face with that mustache and that accent, what else is it going to be? It's not going to be a romantic comedy. So it's going to be a comedy, and that's how they're selling it. What they're smart about, Fox, the distributor, is they're letting the news divisions do the talking, because they have a lot of news shows that are talking about Borat as a meaningful Lenny Bruce kind of film, a film that talks about differences and countries and the hatred of America and things like that. So what they're doing is letting the film marketing unit do its job and saying, look, it's a funny movie because you have a guy talking about chickens and prostitutes, but then you also have the news shows talking about how serious and important this movie is, and you can't do better than that when it comes to marketing or publicity.
Right. Well, Scott, they cut the amount of theaters that this was going to be in. We've talked about it. They launched somewhere around 800. At the end of this week, it's going to be in almost triple the amount of theaters. Do we think it's going to perform well? Will the hype carry over, or will these be theaters where people who weren't interested in seeing Borat weren't going to go anyways?
I think Fox is going to end up looking really smart here in a way that New Line wasn't with Snakes on a Plane. They withheld it just enough. The buzz peaked at the right time. People are talking about it this week. Fox is pretty confident that their weekend haul is going to be bigger this coming weekend than what it opened at. And I think they're going to look pretty smart here. But it's going to die relatively quickly. If you watch the net now, people are beginning to get a little tired of Borat. This is a community that doesn't have a lot of patience for buzz. They're peaking at the right time. I think you're going to see a bigger second weekend and then a pretty quick drop-off.
Then it'll taper off. All right, now, Michael, a lot of people were left scratching their heads last week. NBC Universal pays $42 million for the rights to the next Sacha Baron Cohen film. Now, this is based on Bruno, who's a character that doesn't, I think, have the pull or the same recognition as a Borat.
That's correct.
You know, will the success of Borat propel him and that film's going to be fine, or are people going to be over it by the time this thing actually hits theaters?
Ironically, what's a major success story about Borat is that it was bought for so little and it's such a guerrilla-style filmmaking that you can make a ton of money on it because it wasn't a very expensive project. So here's another studio, Universal, coming in and buying something for $42 million. Do I think it's not prudent and relatively smart? Probably, because it's a lot of money and you just never know. However, if this is a town built on striking while the iron's hot and getting the most famous person of the moment,
sure.
If you're going to spend $42 million, why not do it on Sacha Baron Cohen? Because
Scott, what do you
right
think?
now he's the man.
$42 million, is it a wise move?
$42 million really isn't that much now in terms of Hollywood and comedies. You look at something like Evan Almighty, a comedy that's going for more than $200 million. This is still a comedy on the cheap. I think Universal is going to make some money, not as much as Fox, but $42 million isn't that much by Hollywood standards today.
All right, it's going to be interesting to see how this does on DVD as well. I think people discount that fact that everybody's going to want Borat. They're going to want the extra footage. I think it's going to do incredibly well. And I want to thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today at the old digital water cooler and keeping us in the loop. You know, analysts are sure to puzzle over why Borat succeeded, where others like Snakes on a Plane and Superman Returns, they obviously failed. But in the end, it comes down to Borat actually being a great movie that really everyone can enjoy. I mean, not every film will devote 5 minutes to a pair of naked wrestling Kazakhstanis. Again, thanks to our guests, Scott and Michael, for keeping us all in the Borat loop.